Hi there, and welcome to our Slate demo series. Today is part 3 of swipe tracking data in Slate. This is going to be the final part of our 3-part series. So if you haven't watched part 1 or 2, be sure to do so that you have the full picture of what we are doing here as a part of our Slate demo series. Before we dig in, let me introduce myself. My name is Courtney Mumma. I'm the Assistant Director of Student Success Implementations here at Carnegie. I'm coming at you with 6 years of Slate experience. I started as a Slate captain at a small art college in Portland, Oregon, and then I worked at Technolutions for 2 years as a client support engineer, and I've been spending the rest of my time here at Carnegie in this specific role, and I am the confident and enthusiastic thrill seeker. Today's goal, as a reminder, is the final part of a 3-part series on swipe tracking in Slate. Again, if you have not watched part 1 or 2, that's okay. It just means that what we are sharing today might not make the most sense, so make sure to get the full picture. You do go back and watch part 1 and part 2. But today's agenda is figuring out what exactly we are querying across our entity rows, how we are accounting for our admin updates, because we know students can go kind of fast between one place to another, and they might forget to check out. How do we account for that in our calculations? And then we're going to build one out together. Starting off, what are we querying? What we're querying is the difference between time. And so the difference between the created timestamp, which is that created or that checked in date, and the updated timestamp, which is checked out. That's why we really dug into matching criteria in part 2 on the forms. That checked out form has to match upon the existing entity row in order for us to have these 2 data points, checked in timestamp and checked out timestamp, in order to calculate that passing of time. Now, admin updates, it happens, students go fast, it's okay, but we do need to have a fail-safe in place in order to calculate the time spent without that checked out date or that updated timestamp. And so we have an admin update in minutes field. Minutes is important because our math and our calculations are all based in minutes, and then we're converting to hours to get the most accurate amount of time spent. And so we have this admin update minutes field that y'all can administratively go in and type in after you connect with the student or after you connect with the library where the study hall is hosted to determine how long a specific student spent at their study hall. And then we'll talk about how this contributes to our calculations. Let's start off with our cumulative querying. Cumulative querying in this sense is looking at the sum of all of the entity rows, the time spent in either hours or minutes, into an aggregate sum. So we have cumulative hours, which is looking across all entity rows. We have term hours where we can filter on the specific term in which these entity rows were created. And we can also do one for the last 7 days. So you can see through this week, how many hours have I completed? To account for the many different ways that people learn, I'm trying to hit on 3 different ways. So this is a written out explanation of our export breakdown. I'm going to share this in Slate terms in a screenshot format in just a second, but for those who like to learn by reading and having this as a reference, please take a screenshot, commit this to memory, because this is our kind of our Bible for the rest of our build. This is going to be the standard format for however we are querying for this data. How this slide translates into Slate is something like this. So we're going to start out with our admin export. And so these are for the entity rows where an admin update existed. We're going to start with that, and then we'll dig into our non-admin. So at the very top layer, the very first thing that we're querying for is the addition or the sum of admin plus not admin. Admin and not admin are mutually exclusive. One student shouldn't have an administrative update where there also exists a checked out date or an accurate checked out date. And so these 2 fields are mutually exclusive. To dig into admin, starting off in the green, we first have to join to our entity, swipe tracking, and then we're exporting out our admin update. Again, this is minutes. You should be adding this in as minutes, not by hours, again, for consistency and accurate data. We are exporting out our tracking admin, and then we're changing our output to an aggregate sum. So what this is doing here is that it is looking at our entity, and we are grabbing any of the rows where an admin update exists, and then we're summing those together. This minutes is nested within a formula to take those minutes and divide it by 60. So this gives us our hours. And then that is our first export here. So that is admin. This is the configuration for calculating how many admin minutes have been spent. Non-admin or our not admin export, very similar to the admin one, just with one extra layer. So we're starting in not admin, we're taking our minutes divided by 60. We are aggregate summing our minutes together, but we do have to do one additional thing to our minutes to determine exactly how many minutes were spent. This isn't an administrative update where you type it in. We have to do math to calculate how many minutes were spent. So in the aggregate sum part of this query, we're joining to swipe tracking. And then in another subquery export, we are going to do a formula for a date diff. If you click the pound sign on any Slate formula, it gives you a whole bunch of different options. You're going to choose date diff minute, again, important minutes. And then we are going to export our created date and our updated date. And what this will do is it will calculate the difference between those two data points in minutes. One other part of this configuration to make these two items mutually exclusive is we need to filter for the admin update to not exist. We do not want to aggregate sum. We do not want to sum together the minutes for any entity rows where an admin update exists. Otherwise, this math will give us inflated results, and we're already accounting for admin in our very first export. So make sure that you are adding in that filter there. Let's talk about instance tracking. So again, that was cumulative, looking across a week, looking across a term, looking across all entity rows to get your data. Let's talk about instance tracking. Instance tracking is how much each individual instance or entity row or session at the library, how long the student was there. And so we can see here that I have time spent in hours and time spent in minutes, just so that we can check our math. And this is going to be our instance querying. We can still see our cumulative up the top. Instance querying looks very similar to cumulative, except we don't actually have to join to swipe tracking because it's all handled within the entity widget itself. And so here we are doing total minutes divided by 60 to give us our hours, but the total minutes is actually going to be a coalesce statement. If this is your first time seeing a coalesce statement, they work very similarly to an exclusivity group where it will evaluate top to bottom. If a value exists here, then it will print or give you the result of that value. If not, it will move down the line to the next export until there is values there, until there is data there. And so that's why we can use a coalesce statement here, is because, again, mutually exclusive. Only one should exist on every entity row. In our non-admin export, this is where we're going to do that same date diff calculation that we did in our cumulative. And so we have our filter for not admin. We do not want to calculate those. And we are going to do a date diff minute for our swipe tracking created date and then our updated date. And then this all flows together to give us the total minutes of a specific instance of this row. Okay, those are my two different ways of showing this information. And now let's go ahead and build one together. So I'm going to bring over my quick read here. This is on the base of person. And I'm going to first start off. I know that not all 51 of my records, all of my people records have swipe tracking data on them. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to our filter section. I'm going to join to swipe tracking, and then just keep the aggregate as exists. And so this is exists, swipe tracking. This way, so when I preview the results, I actually see the results that I'm looking for and not just null rows. And let's go ahead and start by building our cumulative hours export. So this is going to be cumulative hours. And at the very top, this is the formula, and I'm going to type in admin plus not admin. This is my preferred way of doing it, of just typing out what each layer means, because there are a lot of layers to this subquery export. And then let's go ahead and start with our admin. In a subquery export here, I'm going to make this admin. In our output, this changes to a formula for our minutes divided by 60. And then we're going to go one layer deeper into another export. And then this is going to be named minutes. Our output here is the aggregate sum of, we got to join to our swipe tracking. From our swipe tracking, we want to sum all of our admin updates here. One other thing that I should recommend and do recommend is including null values. We're going to be doing a lot of math, and Slate doesn't like doing math when a value doesn't exist. And so make sure that you're putting null values in any of these data points that will be used in a formula. Otherwise, you're going to get an error and then you have to go back and add them. So make sure that you have null values in each of these layers. So again, admin, I'm going to change this one to real because our top layer is a formula, and formulas only work with integers and real numbers. So I'm going to change this to real. And again, give it a null value of 0 and click save. And that is our admin update. Let's go ahead and make our not admin update. Not admin. The very top layer is again a formula of minutes divided by 60. And then in here, this is the aggregate sum of our swipe tracking. Save. And then we can't just export our non-admin stuff. We have to do the math. And so we're going to do an export here. This is also going to be minutes, where this is a formula where we are exporting out our created date and our updated date. And then we're going to do, again, that pound sign gives you all of the different kinds of calculations that you can do. Again, minutes, we want to choose minute. And then how I remember which one needs to go first is alphabetical. C becomes U, so the created date comes first, and then the updated date. If you flip those around, that just means that you're going to have negative values in the calculation. So make sure that you're choosing created and then updated date first. Learn from my mistake initially of figuring out why we had negative values. Anyhow, want to make sure it's created and then updated date. Save. One extra thing that we have to do in here is that not existence of our admin update. So our top layer is mutually exclusive. Not admin. Click save. Null value is 0. This is lowercase minutes. Save. This is real plus a null value here. Oh, one other thing. In your date diff calculation, you're going to want to add a row limit of 1 so that it evaluates all of the entity rows one at a time, and then summing them together. If you don't have that row limit, it's trying to do math across too many rows and it won't work. So make sure that you're adding a row limit there, not admin. And then we have our formula admin, not admin for cumulative hours. Click save. You preview the results, and then there you go. Now, if you wanted to add a format mask to this so that you don't have infinite number of digits, come back into your export, scroll on down, change this to a real number, and then give it a format mask of down or whatever you want there. Click save, and then we have our results here. So again, this is cumulative hours. This is going to be doing this math across all of the entity rows. That will probably work for a single term, but eventually you probably want more helpful data in looking at the specific terms themselves. And so what you can do is just make a copy of your cumulative hours, and then we're going to add in a term here. So to add in a term, where you joined to your entity row, you're just going to filter here. And so what this is looking for, I'm going to choose fall 2024. What this is saying is that I want to calculate the aggregate sum of admin minutes for my entity row where the term is fall 2024. If I click save here, click save, you're going to want to do the exact same thing for your not admin as well. So we're already filtering for the not admin existing here. We're also going to want to add term just so that we are comparing apples to apples and adding all of the right things together. Save, 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 save as copy, preview the results. I've done a lot of tracking this specific term, so the numbers aren't different, but as terms turn over, this will change term by term. Last up here, if we want to do the last 7 days, we can do the same thing. Where when you come in and you find here, let's get rid of this, and you would just filter for the created date is greater than equal to today minus 7. Save, 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 and we come back through, delete here, and then we grab our created date. It is today minus 7. Save, 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 copy. And then we can see that our numbers are different because not everybody has submitted in the last 7 days. So that's how we query for it in the aggregate on the cumulative. I will show our instance tracking real quick in our study hall entity widget. So again, this is the column headers that you see here and the entity table here. This is all being populated from our study hall widget here. We go into edit properties. In the custom list fields is where you're going to do those calculations. So for the time spent in hours, like I showed on our slide deck, it's the total minutes divided by 60, where the total minutes is that coalesce statement of the admin update versus the non-admin update. We should be very familiar with this formula by now, but you do not actually have to filter for anything. You also don't have to filter for term and things like that, because what these custom list fields do, it just gives us the data for each individual instance. Okay, and with that, that concludes our 3-part series on swipe tracking in Slate. I appreciate y'all going on this journey with me, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk through this specific process or how to use this process for other applications on your campus. So thank you again, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Thanks, bye.